Good afternoon. Many of you know me. I'm Miss Christmas, and I'm a teacher at Eastville Global Magnet School. And I hear y'all have been studying about life in the United States during colonial times. And so I invited my husband, who I'm going to introduce to you in just a minute. His name is Mr. Stan, to come and talk to you about the land where we live, up in Buncombe County in the mountains, and how life was for his dad and his grandparents. So it might remind you of some things you've learned about colonial times. And first, a little treat. I want to introduce you to our puppy, Charlene. Come here, Charlene. This is Charlene. Come say hello and touch. Good girl. Touch. And touch. Good. Okay. Good girl. All right. Thank you very much.
Hey there, I'm Mr. Stan. I'm married to Miss Christmas, and this is the land that we're going to tell you about. It's called the Old Place, and it's been in my family for many generations, probably going back to colonial times, I might think. I want to introduce you here to some of our friends. These are the chickies. These are our chickens, and they give us eggs, and we enjoy watching the chickens, and we enjoy eating their eggs. Now I'm going to go down and I'm going to show you the Old Place house, what's left of it from where my grandfather and grandmother lived and where my dad was born. I'll show you, here's a picture of it. This was the house when it was still standing. It's not standing anymore. The only thing that's left is the chimney. But this is where my dad was born, and he had 11 brothers and sisters. There were 12 of them, and they lived out here on the Old Place. This house was built probably in the early 1900s. Not sure exactly what year. We'll go down and see what the chimney looks like now.
Okay.
So this is the chimney from the Old Place house that my grandparents built back in the probably 19-teens. And the house was actually built from the wood from the native chestnut tree. It was covered these mountains, the native chestnut, back 150 years ago. Up until the 1920s when it got a blight, a disease. But it was a huge tree. It was way bigger than any of the oak trees that we have now. Big, very big around, and a lot of wood that they could get out of it to build their houses and things. So it was a chestnut house, but it wasn't insulated. It was really cold in the wintertime. I've heard my dad and my aunt and uncle say that when they would sleep in the wintertime, they would have to go put a big rock or a brick or something in the fire and get it really hot, and then wrap it up in a cloth and take it to bed with them so that they could stay warm for a little while to go to sleep with that hot rock or hot brick. And then in the morning, if it snowed, there was space in between the wood, and the snow would have blown in and it might be covering their bed. And so it was kind of rough living out here. In years since, we used to keep down here where that little wood structure is, we used to keep beehives, but there are bears that live up here in the woods, and they like the honey. So a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, was the last time we had a beehive there. And when the bears started coming up and robbing our beehive, we decided we didn't want to attract the bears, so we just buy the honey from the store now. One thing that's remaining here from when my grandmother lived here, she loved flowers, and she planted daffodils. And every spring right around here, there'll be more and more daffodils come up, so I really like that. That's a connection to my grandmother, is to see her daffodils that keep spreading here in what was her yard. A very important structure here on the Old Place. This was the outhouse back in the day before indoor plumbing. This is where there was a space to use the bathroom before there was a bathroom. This is the toilet here, the outdoor toilet. Is still standing after all these years. I'm going to go around here and show you the door. And there is the throne itself, the seat. Be a little bit scary, I think, to make use of it today. Don't know what kind of critters might be living down in there. Spiders, snakes, whatever. But with as many kids as my grandparents had living out here, I have heard that not everyone used the outhouse. The woods were the primary preferred space if you needed to use the bathroom. Just kind of go find a spot in the woods. But here was the other word for it was the privy, the place for some privacy. This is our garden spot, and this is the spot that I gardened with my dad when he was alive, and he gardened here when he was a boy, and probably goes back a few generations, I would think. We grow corn and beans and potatoes and tomatoes and lettuce and squash and melons and all sorts of good things here. Basil. Right now it's got a cover crop. It's barley. This helps. You know, we grow it, and then in the springtime we till it under, and that helps keep the earth nourished and rich. This land here, probably a couple hundred years ago, was hunting ground for the Cherokee. They never lived here that I know of, but they hunted here, and we know that partly because a lot of times in the garden we'll find arrowheads. I found several arrowheads here when I'm working in the garden. So this is a place I love to work. It's a beautiful spot, and we're going to show you now the spring where we get water to water the garden. Right here in this pile of leaves, underneath that leaves is a pool of water, and this is our spring. We clean out the leaves every spring around Easter time. We like to clean it out good, and under there, it comes from an underground river, and there's springs all over this mountain, and they're all the underground rivers that come up above ground at these spots, and they form creeks. So if you got under these leaves going on down through there, it turns into a creek. And we use this now to carry water when there's not enough rain. We'll carry buckets of water and we'll water our garden. Before, when my grandparents lived here and when my dad was little, this was what they used to keep some of their food cold. They didn't have refrigerators. This was before the era of refrigeration indoors. So they would come down here and they would have a little box to keep their butter and their eggs and other kind of food that needed refrigeration, because it's really, really cold water. It's freezing water, even in the middle of summer, because the water's coming from underground. It's really cold, so that would keep their food from spoiling, is to keep it there in the spring. And Charlene, our dog, she loves to go there now and drink whenever, in the summertime, when it's really hot outside, she'll go get a drink. And what I like to do is, when I'm working in the garden and I get too hot, I just come over and I stick my head right in the spring, and I get my hat wet, and that cools me off to keep on working in the garden. Jim's cleaning out some of the leaves so that you'll be able to see that there really is water under there. This is where some of our nephews and nieces like to come down in the summertime and turn over rocks right around the spring, and they'll find salamanders.
It's good and cold. Too cold to go swimming right now, though.
Here, sit, shake. Good girl. Good girl. Touch. Good girl. Sit. Sit. Lay down. Ignacio. Good girl. Good girl.
You see them little legs? You see them little legs? The little feet? I remember you let us hold one.
Yeah, that's right.